Okay, I'm going to go ahead and get started, and we'll let people drift in as they may. Tonight we're going to get started on the book of Job. And book of Job is actually the beginning. I mentioned this at the end last time, but this is the beginning of a whole new section of the Old Testament. Because what we've been reading so far, from Genesis all the way through 3rd Maccabees, has been basically historical material, sometimes called the historical books. And because they're basically narrating the history of Israel from the beginning all the way through to in the case of 3rd Maccabees, we got all the way up to about 120 BC. So that whole span of time, Abraham being in about 2000 BC all the way up, is sort of narrated there. And now there are going to be two more big sort of chunks of books. One of them is going to be wisdom literature, which is what we're starting tonight. And the other one is going to be the prophets. And as I mentioned last time, the prophets are mostly people who we've read about at some point during those historical books. But this is going to be the actual prophecies that those prophets prophesied. Okay, this is going to be the things they actually said. And they're going to take place throughout that history that we already read. So the history we already read is going to be the framework when we get to the prophets. These books of wisdom literature are also sort of scattered in time in terms of when they were written, when they were compiled throughout that whole history. But they're the kind of literature that aren't as time dependent. Right? I mean, they're not relating specific events that happened at a specific time necessarily. They're not prophecies for or against particular nations and particular people at a particular time. What the wisdom literature is, by and large, is human beings, the authors, human beings reflecting on particularly the creation, the world we live in, God's relationship to it and to them. And so that's why Psalms gets smushed in with wisdom literature. Like when we get to Proverbs, it'll be real obvious this is wisdom literature because it's a whole bunch of Proverbs, you know. Go to the ant, thou sluggard, meaning if you're lazy, be more like an ant, look how they work, you know, that kind of thing. It's sort of like Aesop's fables or something, but Psalms gets lumped in there because Psalms is a book of hymns. And in the book of Psalms, we tend to think of it as related to David, and there's a whole lot of it that was written by David or was written during David's time. But there are Psalms written by Moses in the book of Psalms, and there are Psalms written much later. There are Psalms written during the exile and even after the exile that are in the book of Psalms. Now that said, Job is even unique among other books of wisdom literature. Because most of the wisdom literature we're going to look at, I already mentioned Psalms, and I'll be doing introductions for all these books as we get to them. But we have books like the Wisdom of Ben Sirach and the Wisdom of Solomon and Proverbs that are these wise sayings or reflections. Job is written sort of like a narrative. It's written as a story. It's written as a story. It's doing the same thing that other wisdom literature is. It's reflecting on the relationship between God and His creation, but it's doing it in the form of a story. Okay. Specifically, Job is going to be dealing with, the very brief summary is, why do bad things happen to good people? Right? More, why is there evil and suffering in the world? Okay. Now that said, Job itself has sort of two elements or two pieces to it. The first couple chapters and the last couple of chapters are written in a completely different type of language than most of the book. Okay. Not only is it a different type of language, but there's a different vocabulary that's used. in the first couple of chapters and the last couple of chapters that we'll see are sort of a frame. The first couple of chapters sort of set up the book, and then the last couple of chapters sort of wrap things up. The first couple of chapters and the last couple of chapters, for example, always refer to God as Yahweh. Okay. The whole rest of the book of the middle part never refers to God as Yahweh. So that's a graphic example in terms of vocabulary. The middle part of Job, other than those first two chapters and last two chapters, are probably the oldest thing we have in the Bible. Yeah. And to give you an idea of how old it is, and I'm talking about, it was written down as one of the oldest parts, meaning it probably as oral, as a story being told, predates when it was written down. But the Hebrew or Aramaic, it's not even really Hebrew, it's sort of a Proto-Hebrew that it's written in, is so old that, for example, the Septuagint leaves out sentences because they didn't know what they meant. At that time, the rabbis didn't know what some of the words meant because it's that old. The same thing in the Latin translation, the Vulgate, and in the Syriac translation that was done. They didn't know what the words meant. Some of those we now know what they meant because we discovered, archaeologists back in the 1940s discovered a whole new language called Ugaritic, which is a Semitic language that was used by people around the city of Ugarit, and which is similar to very early Hebrew. But the stone tablets we found there with the Ugaritic writing on them are far older than any of the biblical texts. But some of the words that we didn't know what they meant exactly in Job occurred in some of these letters. Okay. So, to put a finer point on it, that the middle part of Job, the written part of it, most people think dates back to somewhere between 1600 and 1800 BC. That's before David. That's before the Exodus. And that's before Moses. Well, and as we talked about, when we talked about the Exodus, most people now, they agree to what's called the late date for Moses, meaning that Moses lived in the 1200s. So this is way before Moses, most likely. Abraham, they usually estimate, was around 2000 BC. Okay. And again, this is when we think it was written down. So the story as such would go back even before that. Okay. So this is most likely, like I said, other than that frame that was attached at the front and the back to sort of set it in place, the oldest thing we have. The oldest thing we have. There's nothing in the main text itself that tells us exactly who Job, that's his name in the Hebrew, Job. And in the Greek translation, there's a note at the end, and in the Septuagint, they explain at the end that there's a tradition that identifies him as Yobab, who was Esau's grandson. Okay, so if we go back to, you had Abraham, his son Isaac, he had two sons, Jacob and Esau. Right? And then Jacob had the 12 sons who the 12 tribes were named after. Esau had a son and then a grandson. The grandson was named Yobab. Okay. So that's the tradition of who he was. And that fits with this. That fits with this. So it may very well be, and sort of our default position would be that is who he is. Okay, and that would explain a number of things, like they wouldn't refer to God as Yahweh. Well, this is before Moses in the Exodus when he revealed that name to Moses. Okay, so this is very old. And as we're going to see, it's written, I said it's a narrative or a story, but other than the first 2 chapters and the last 2 chapters, it's not, story the way we've been reading stories. Like in Genesis when we read the stories about Jacob and Esau. The first 2 chapters and the last 2 chapters are sort of story. And then what we have are sort of a series of speeches. We get in the setup what happens to Job. And then Job has these 3 friends. I'm using the term friend loosely here. And his wife and some other people who come and will sort of give speeches to him. And then he responds to them with a sort of a speech. And it goes back and forth throughout the book. So it's more like if you've ever read one of Plato's dialogues, or some people have even described it as sort of being like a play. Now they didn't have plays at this time where people would get up on a stage, but it may have been told that way. They may have been told, when it was told as a story before it was written down, there may have been different storytellers who would do the different speeches, But it's sort of written more like that. And then ultimately at the end, it concludes with some speeches going back and forth between Job and God. So that's where it sort of winds up. And as I said, we'll see as we get going, Job is a person who a lot of really bad things happens to. And sort of the question of the book is why. And so even though this happens, this is the oldest thing we have in the Bible, right? It's also one of the things that is sort of most timely, because how often does that question come up? Again and again and again. If there's a God and he supposedly loves me, why is all this stuff happening to me and to the people I love, the people I care about? Okay. So that said, does anybody have any questions about any of that before we get started? Yeah.
I have one question. I'm not exactly sure how to phrase it. But as we see in Job, God, okay, he seems to go against everything that the Christian God is supposed to represent. Why is that?
We'll go into that as we go through it. I don't want to steal too much thunder out of that before we go through it. I will also note there's a movie that came out 2 years ago now called Tree of Life. If you saw that movie and were deeply confused, reading Job will help you. If you haven't seen it yet, after we've gone through Job, you might want to see it.
You might want to see it.
You might want to see it.
You got to bring some TV here.
I enjoyed it, but it basically the movie is a meditation on the book of Job. And it starts out with a quotation from the book of Job at the beginning. But your average person who walked into the theater wasn't thinking of the book of Job at the time. So it's really confusing if you don't know the book of Job. But that's a side comment. So. Okay, so Job 1 verse 1. In the land of Uz there lived a man whose name was Job. This man was blameless and upright. He feared God and shunned evil. He had 7 sons and 3 daughters, and he owned 7,000 sheep, 3,000 camels, 500 yoke of oxen, and 500 donkeys, and had a large number of servants. He was the greatest man among all the people of the East. Okay, so remember we're going back. If you could set the Wayback Machine, we were back in Genesis. Remember they list all the herds and all the crowd to show how wealthy everyone was. This is how wealth was amassed then. It was by how big your flocks and herds were. Verse 4, his sons used to take turns holding feasts in their homes, and they would invite their 3 sisters to eat and drink with them. When a period of feasting had run its course, Job would send and have them purified. Early in the morning he would sacrifice a burnt offering for each of them, thinking, perhaps my children have sinned and cursed God in their hearts. This was Job's regular custom. So not only are we told he's a good guy, but he's a pretty good dad. Because every morning he goes out and offers this offering of praise for them, just in case any of his children have sinned. Verse 6, one day the angels came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan also came with them. Well, here's Satan showing up. We've only seen him referred to by that name one other place. Does anybody remember where that was? I mean, we saw him in Genesis, but he wasn't referred to as Satan there. He was referred to as the dragon or the serpent. The other place Satan showed up was in Chronicles. Remember when David went and did the census? They talk about Chronicles said that Satan caused him to do it. So that's the only other place Satan by the name Satan has showed up. So I'll talk a little bit about that now. Hasatan, which is what it's translating, means the adversary. The adversary. Okay. So the picture here, remember we talked about, and we'll see more of this when we get into the prophets, but we talked about how in the tabernacle, the way it was woven, they wove the cherubim into the curtains on the sides, and then it was supposed to represent, the altar was a footstool of God's throne, and then the angels were gathered around. So this is the picture here is that God is like the king, right? He's the king of the earth, and the angels are all gathered around him like his court. Okay. So this idea that they came to present themselves to God is that this is, a gathering of God's court.
What language is Hasatan?
Hebrew. Yeah. So they all show up to gather the court, and the adversary shows up too. Okay. Now, just in case there's any doubt in your mind, if you could flip ahead all the way to the book of Revelation, St. John identifies that Satan and the dragon, the serpent in Genesis, and all those are the same person, the same being. I shouldn't say person, he's not a person, but the same being. The same fallen angelic being. So all the angels show up. Satan, the fallen angel, shows up too. Okay. And so the name Satan, again, is adversary. The idea is that he's the one who opposes God. So verse 7, the Lord said to Satan, "Where have you come from?" Satan answered the Lord, "From roaming through the earth and going back and forth in it." Then the Lord said to Satan, "Have you considered my servant Job? There is no one on earth like him. He is blameless and upright, a man who fears God and shuns evil." "Does Job fear God for nothing?" Satan replied. "Have you not put a hedge around him and his household and everything he has? You have blessed the work of his hands so that his flocks and herds are spread throughout the land. But stretch out your hand and strike everything he has, and he will surely curse you to your face." Right? So the devil says, well, sure, he loves you. Look at all the stuff you gave him. You gave me all that stuff, I'd love you too. Right? He's got a great life. Everything's going wonderful for him. Right? But what's he really saying? What's he really saying? He's really saying Job isn't righteous. What he's really saying is this whole relationship, God, between you and Job is bogus. It's fake. Job's just out for himself. Right? That's the only reason he curries favor with you is because he wants stuff. He wants you to bless him. Right? So verse 12, the Lord said to Satan, "Very well then, everything he has is in your hands, but on the man himself do not lay a finger." Then Satan went out from the presence of the Lord. One day when Job's sons and daughters were feasting and drinking wine at the oldest brother's house, a messenger came to Job and said, "The oxen were plowing and the donkeys were grazing nearby, and the Sabaeans attacked and carried them off. They put the servants to the sword, and I am the only one who has escaped to tell you." While he was still speaking, another messenger came and said, "The fire of God fell from the sky and burned up the sheep and the servants, and I am the only one who has escaped to tell you." While he was still speaking, another messenger came and said, "The Chaldeans formed 3 raiding parties and swept down on your camels and carried them off. They put the servants to the sword, and I am the only one who has escaped to tell you." While he was still speaking, yet another messenger came and said, "Your sons and daughters were feasting and drinking wine at the oldest brother's house, when suddenly a mighty wind swept in from the desert and struck the 4 corners of the house. It collapsed on them, and they are dead, and I am the only one who has escaped to tell you." So in one day, one after another, all his wealth, everything he owns, his children, all dead. Right? Everything gone. Everything gone. So verse 20, at this Job got up and tore his robe and shaved his head. Then he fell to the ground in worship and said, "Naked I came from my mother's womb, and naked I will depart. The Lord gave, and the Lord has taken away. May the name of the Lord be praised." And all this Job did not sin by charging God with wrongdoing. Right. So his response, which I do not think would be my response, but his response is, look, I came into this world with nothing. I'm not going to be able to take anything with me. God gave it all to me in the first place. Now he's taking it away. Blessed be the name. So be it. He praises the Lord. Doesn't lash out at God. So chapter 2, verse 1, on another day the angels came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan also came with them to present himself before him. And the Lord said to Satan, "Where have you come from?" Satan answered the Lord, "From roaming through the earth and going back and forth in it." Now you notice that language where what Satan says he's doing? St. Peter's going to refer to that when he says that the devil prowls around like a roaring lion, looking for someone to devour. He's not just going to and fro, wandering around, checking out the scenery. Right? He's looking for opportunities.
I remember, Father, when I first read Job and that answer to Satan in the King James, it says, Satan said, "From going to and fro the earth and from walking up and down in it." I found that terrifying. Satan is real and walks
Yeah.
among us.
Sure does.
Well, and like a lion.
Yeah, it's beautifully written in the King James.
Then he's
What Bible was that again?
right. So he's looking for opportunities. He's looking for opportunities. He's looking for somebody to give him a toll, someone to give him an in, something to latch onto.
All right, let me go to the flip side, the dark side. First of all, between the devil and God, is this not a bet?
Yeah.
The devil saying, "Hey, I bet you I'll protect Job if you let me do this."
Well, I don't know. I would say it's more of an accusation. Like I said, it's the accusation is this relationship you claim you have with this Job guy, where he loves you so much and he's so righteous and does everything you say and
So-
that's bogus.
So then Job is the only righteous one, because apparently his family is not, because they're saying they're drinking wine. Sounds like they're partying.
They're partying an awful lot,
an
yeah.
awful lot.
So it's a little questionable. His wife is definitely not a peach. We'll meet her later.
And it seems also that all of his servants, none are righteous, but Job. They're all destroyed, but one just to deliver the message. Okay, that's fine.
Okay. Verse 3, then the Lord said to Satan, "Have you considered my servant Job? There is no one on earth like him. He is blameless and upright, a man who fears God and shuns evil. And he still maintains his integrity, though you incited me against him to ruin him without any reason." Right? He says, still, look, see? Point proven. It wasn't just because I gave him all the stuff. I took away the stuff, and he's still... Verse 4, skin for skin, Satan replied. A man will give all he has for his own life. But stretch out your hand and strike his flesh and bones, and he will surely curse you to your face. So Satan says, no, you haven't proven anything yet. I still think this is bogus. Right? Because you didn't do anything to him. Right? You took away all his stuff, but he probably thinks, oh, he could always get more stuff. Right? He's still alive. He's still healthy. Right? He's mourning, but, he says, you do something to him, and watch how quick this little love fest comes to an end between Job and you. So the Lord said to Satan, very well then, he is in your hands, but you must spare his life. So Satan went out from the presence of the Lord and afflicted Job with painful sores from the soles of his feet to the top of his head. Then Job took a piece of broken pottery and scraped himself with it as he sat among the ashes. Right, that's the sat on the ashes and the scrape with the sores. You have to picture, remember what time of history we're talking about. In the little cities and communities, right, remember we have no plumbing. So when people have to relieve themselves, they go in a pot. They take said pot out to the edge of town and they empty it into a big heap. The Greek word for that is a kopros. Okay, it's where they throw all of the feces from the town, people and animals. And that's also the area that's used as the dump. And the main trash of that period of history was broken pots, right? Broken clay pots, because they were useless. That's most of what they threw out. So the picture here is, now that Job has lost everything, is broke, right? He's lost everything. He now gets these sores, and so he's sitting out in the dung heap, sitting out on top of everyone's discarded feces. And he grabs a piece of the broken pottery, and he's using that to sort of lance the boils and sores he's got all over his body. Okay? So this is about as bad as, he was the wealthiest man in all the East to sitting on a dung heap, lancing his sores with broken pottery. His house collapsed on top of his family.
Yeah, but, couldn't he have sat
on open ground somewhere?
No.
The reason why he would have been there is because he needed food, which would have also been in the trash that was getting thrown out.
Kind of like a dumpster dive.
Because he has no food anymore. His herds are all gone. But yeah, he's eating what other people throw away in the dump. Okay. So yeah, this is about as bad as you can get without dying. So verse 9, here's his wife. His wife said to him, are you still holding on to your integrity? Curse God and die. Right? Just get this over with, right? Clearly, God has it in for you, right? So just curse him and have him strike you down finally and get this over with, because this is misery. Verse 10, he replied, you are talking like a foolish woman. Shall we accept good from God and not trouble? In all this, Job did not sin in what he said. And so his response is, hey, when God was giving me good things, when he was giving me health, I accepted those. Yeah. So now if he's going to give me bad things, I've got to accept those too. Again, this would not be my response, probably. Right? I'm a lot more whiny than that. I would at least be some fierce complaining coming forth.
I have a question. Now, why is she telling him? What's it going to do for her to keep telling him to just curse God and die?
Well, from her perspective, right? He obviously, to have all that stuff happen in one day, and now the boils and everything to boot. he's obviously, in her thinking, or that's going to be developed a little here later when we get into the speeches. In her thinking, right, obviously he's under a curse from God. God's mad at him. Okay.
Real bad.
And is taking it out on him. Right? Well, there were her kids too. You know? She's homeless too. You know?
You want to explain a little bit why the Septuagint in the Orthodox Study Bible has a lot more verses, dialogue in there, so curse God and die? Because, behold, I wait a little longer looking for the hope of my salvation. Listen, your memory's wiped out from the earth, your sons, your daughters, the pangs and pains from my womb, which I suffered in vain.
Yeah.
Hardships. I mean, she's really laying it on him.
Yeah.
Before she gets to the...
Yeah, that's...
where is that all coming from?
It's stuff later on that the Septuagint, we're going to get to it later on, that the Septuagint dropped in there. But yeah, she in the Septuagint, they have that here, where she talks about, like you said, how, you know, she wasted her time giving birth to these kids because now they're all gone and everything. So it's and they put it there, I think, to clarify that a little, rather than just having her show up and say, curse God and die, and you have, well, why? You know, they sort of clarify that by bringing in some stuff from, dropping in that from later in the book.
In fact, she even implies that he's not in a bad position. Because she says, you yourself are sitting down, spending the nights in the open air among the rottenness of worms, and I go about as a wanderer and a handmaid from place to place, from house to house, waiting for the setting of the sun, so to rest from my labors and pains that now beset me.
Yeah. But that's bring up that idea that it's her too.
Yeah.
You know. Now she's pretty sure that God's not mad at her.
Yeah.
You notice that?
Yeah.
She doesn't say, like, maybe I should curse God and die. She's pretty sure it's God's mad at him, you know, and she's suffering because of it.
He's got all the boils.
Yeah. And she's suffering, she's collateral damage, you know. And so the idea is, if he just curses God and God strikes him down, well, then she can move on with her life. Right? Because God would be done getting his revenge on Job. And like I said, we'll get to that here in a little. Probably not tonight, but it's because it's later on. But. Okay. So, verse 11 there. When Job's three friends, Eliphaz the Temanite, Bildad the Shuhite, and Zophar the Naamathite, no relation to Joe Namath, heard about all the troubles that had come upon him, they set out from their homes and met together by agreement to go and sympathize with him and comfort him. Well, these sound like three good friends, right? They hear all this horrible stuff has happened to Job. They're like, hey, we better go see our buddy Job and try and encourage him. When they saw him from a distance, they could hardly recognize him. They began to weep aloud, and they tore their robes and sprinkled dust on their heads. Then they sat on the ground with him for 7 days and 7 nights. No one said a word to him because they saw how great his suffering was. Okay, so they don't know what to say. Right? So they come and they just sit with him. Well, they're going to figure out some things to say here. So now that's the setup. Okay, that's the setup. And so now we're going to get these series of speeches going back and forth. This is where we transition into the older part, the older original part of the book here. So chapter 3, verse 1. After this, Job opened his mouth and cursed the day of his birth. Okay, now notice, doesn't curse God, curses the day of his birth. He said, may the day of my birth perish, and the night it was said, a boy is born. That day may it turn to darkness, may God above not care about it, may no light shine upon it. May darkness and deep shadow claim it once more, may a cloud settle over it, may blackness overwhelm its light. That night may thick darkness seize it, may it not be included among the days of the year, nor be entered in any of the months. May that night be barren, may no shout of joy be heard in it. May those who curse days curse that day, those who are ready to rouse Leviathan. May its morning stars become dark, may it wait for daylight in vain, and not see the first rays of dawn. For it did not shut the doors of the womb on me to hide trouble from my eyes. Okay. So he's again, he's not cursing God, but he's at, I wish I was never born, point. Right? He's like, it would have been better just not to be born than to have to go through this. Leviathan there, we're not sure exactly what it's a reference to. You may notice it's referenced in the psalm we read at the beginning of Vespers. Also Psalm 102. It's something big that lives in the ocean. And there are various theories that people have put forward, that it's a big crocodile from the Nile, or that it's a whale, or that it's some big animal that lives in the ocean. Okay. So first he curses the day he was born. And now, verse 11, why did I not perish at birth, and die as I came from the womb? Why were there knees to receive me, and breasts that I might be nursed? For now I would be lying down in peace, I would be asleep and at rest, with kings and counselors of the earth who built for themselves places now lying in ruins, with rulers who had gold, who filled their houses with silver. Or why was I not hidden in the ground like a stillborn child, like an infant who never saw the light of day? There the wicked cease from turmoil, and there the weary are at rest. Captives also enjoy their ease. They no longer hear the slave driver shout. The small and the great are there, and the slave is freed from his master. So the idea here is, and again, this is why this is classified as wisdom literature. What's he saying about death? He says death at least is an equalizer, right? He said I was at the top and now I'm at the bottom, right? If I were just dead, I'd be right in the middle, you know. Yeah, in our funeral service, where Kings and Beggars does say, you know, he talks about, you know, kings built these magnificent tombs that now are in ruins, you know, but slaves there are at rest and are not being beaten. That would have been better, you know, than to go way up and then go way down, to just, you know, have died. Why is light given to those in misery, and life to the bitter of soul? To those who long for death that does not come, who search for it more than for hidden treasure, who are filled with gladness and rejoice when they reach the grave. Why is life given to a man whose way is hidden, whom God has hedged in? For sighing comes to me instead of food, my groans pour out like water. What I feared has come upon me, what I dreaded has happened to me. I have no peace, no quietness, I have no rest, but only turmoil. So he's saying, you know, the analogy uses like light. You know, it's like, why do you, if somebody's sitting in a cave in darkness, why would you go and shine a little bit of light in there? Right, just to torment them. Torture. You know, why leave me alive if you're going to do all this to me? Just let me die. Right? But notice, he wants to die, but he's not going to curse God to do it. Chapter 4, verse 1. Then Eliphaz the Temanite, here's one of our friends. If someone ventures a word with you, will you be impatient? But who can keep from speaking? Think how you have instructed many, how you have strengthened feeble hands. Your words have supported those who stumbled. You have strengthened faltering knees. But now trouble comes to you and you are discouraged. It strikes you and you are dismayed. Should not your piety be your confidence and your blameless ways your hope? So he says to him, think of all the people you've helped in your life, right? Don't say you wish you were never born or you died when you were born. Think of all the people you've helped in your life. Now you need some help, right? He says, now you need some help. We're here to help you. Verse 7, consider now, who being innocent has ever perished? Where were the upright ever destroyed? As I have observed, those who plow evil and those who sow trouble reap it. At the breath of God they are destroyed, at the blast of his anger they perish. The lions may roar and growl, yet the teeth of the great lions are broken. The lion perishes for lack of prey, and the cubs of the lioness are scattered. A word was secretly brought to me, my ears caught a whisper of it. Amid disquieting dreams in the night, when deep sleep falls on men, fear and trembling seized me and made all my bones shake. A spirit glided past my face, and the hair on my body stood on end. It stopped, but I could not tell what it was. A form stood before my eyes, and I heard a hushed voice. Can a mortal be more righteous than God? Can a man be more pure than his Maker? If God places no trust in his servants, if he charges his angels with error, how much more those who live in houses of clay, whose foundations are in the dust, who are crushed more readily than a moth? Between dawn and dusk they are broken to pieces unnoticed. They perish forever. Are not the cords of their tent pulled up so that they die without wisdom? So what's he saying here? Right? He's saying, I've been around a while. Seems to me like most of the people who bad things happen to, they had it coming. Right? They went out and did something wrong or lived their life the wrong way, and then consequences showed up and wiped them out. Right? So what does he then start implying? He says, well, look, there are angels that did wrong. Right? You're just a human being. Right? Maybe there's something you did wrong. Right? That makes sense, right? You did something wrong and God's punishing you for it. Right? That's where he's going with this. Chapter 5, call if you will, but who will answer you? To which of the holy ones will you turn? Resentment kills a fool and envy slays the simple. I myself have seen a fool taking root, but suddenly his house was cursed. His children are far from safety, crushed in court without a defender. The hungry consume his harvest, taking it even from among thorns, and the thirsty pant after his wealth. For hardship does not spring from the soil, nor does trouble sprout from the ground. Yet man is born to trouble as surely as sparks fly upward. Right? So again, he's saying, I've seen this happen before. Somebody's foolish and they're living the right life the wrong way. They get their house set up and established, they get a little bit of wealth, and then everything goes wrong. There's disaster, and it's because they weren't doing the right thing. So now we get to the advice. Verse 8, but if it were I would appeal to God. I would lay my cause before him. He performs wonders that cannot be fathomed, miracles that cannot be counted. He bestows rain on the earth, he sends water upon the countryside. The lowly he sets on high, and those who mourn are lifted to safety. He thwarts the plans of the crafty so that their hands achieve no success. He catches the wise in their craftiness, and the schemes of the wily are kept away. Darkness comes upon them in the daytime. At noon they grope as in the night. He saves the needy from the sword in their mouth. He saves them from the clutches of the powerful. So the poor have hope, and injustice shuts its mouth. Blessed is the man whom God corrects. So do not despise the discipline of the Almighty. Right, so he's saying, again, look, God will bless you. We need to repent, whatever it is. Right? He's just disciplining you the way a father disciplines a child. Just say you're sorry for whatever you did. For he wounds, but he also binds up. He injures, but his hands also heal. From 6 calamities he will rescue you, and 7 no harm will befall you. In famine he will ransom you from death, and in battle from the stroke of the sword. You'll be protected from the lash of the tongue, and need not fear when destruction comes. You will laugh at destruction and famine. You need not fear the beasts of the earth. For you will have a covenant with the stones of the field, and the wild animals will be at peace with you. You will know that your tent is secure. You will take stock of your property and find nothing missing. You will know that your children will be many, and your descendants like the grass of the earth. You will come to the grave in full vigor, like sheaves gathered in season. We have examined this, and it is true, so hear it and apply it to yourself. Right? He says, if you just get everything squared away with God, repent of whatever it was that you did wrong, start living the right way, and everything will go great for you. Right? When you do finally die, you'll be like crops ready for the harvest. Right? You won't even get old and weak. Your children will all be fine. You just need to get on the right track, Job. Repent and get on the right track. Chapter 6. Then Job replied, if only my anguish could be weighed and all my misery be placed on the scales, it would surely outweigh the sand of the seas. No wonder my words have been impetuous. The arrows of the Almighty are in me. My spirit drinks in their poison. God's terrors are marshaled against me. Does a wild donkey bray when it has grass, or an ox bellow when it has fodder? Is tasteless food eaten without salt, or is there flavor in the white of an egg? I refuse to touch it, such food makes me ill. Oh, that I might have my request, that God would grant what I hope for, that God would be willing to crush me, to let loose his hand and cut me off. Then I would still have this consolation, my joy in unrelenting pain, that I had not denied the words of the Holy One. What strength do I have that I should still hope? What prospects that I should be patient? Do I have the strength of stone? Is my flesh bronze? Do I have any power to help myself now that success has been driven from me? A despairing man should have the devotion of his friends, even though he forsakes the fear of the Almighty. But my brothers are undependable as intermittent streams, as the streams that overflow, when darkened by thawing ice and swollen with melting snow, but that cease to flow in the dry season, and in the heat vanish from their channels. Caravans turn aside from their routes, they go up into the wasteland and perish. The caravans of Tema look for water, the traveling merchants of Sheba look in hope. They are distressed because they had been confident. They arrive there only to be disappointed. Now you too have proved to be of no help. You see something dreadful and are afraid. So he's saying to his friend, number one, I didn't do anything.
Yeah.
Right? I haven't denied God. That's sort of the whole point here. And he says, and in terms of, if what you're going to say to me next is, well, he'll rescue me from this because I'm righteous. How much of this do I have to, right? I'm sitting on the dung heap, lancing boils with a potsherd, right? How strong am I expected to be that I can get through this? And then he says, it would be nice to have friends who are dependable, who are there all the time. Right? But you're not like a river. You're like one of those streams that shows up when the snow melts, and then when the summer comes, it's gone. Right? He says, you look at what happened to me and you're afraid. Why? Because it could happen to him. Right? Maybe his little theory of how the world works isn't right on target. Verse 22, have I ever said, give something on my behalf, pay a ransom for me from your wealth, deliver me from the hand of the enemy, ransom me from the clutches of the ruthless? Teach me and I will be quiet. Show me where I have been wrong. How painful are honest words, but what do your arguments prove? Do you mean to correct what I say and treat the words of a despairing man as wind? You would even cast lots for the fatherless and barter away your friend. But now be so kind as to look at me. Would I lie to your face? Relent, do not be unjust. Reconsider, for my integrity is at stake. Is there any wickedness on my lips? Can my mouth not discern malice? Right? So he's saying, look, I didn't ask you for money. Right? Which would be the first thing most people would ask for if they were homeless like this. He says, all I wanted was your friendship. He says, but if you're so wise, explain to me. Explain to me what I did. Tell me what I did wrong. Correct me. I'm listening. Right? Tell me where it is I sinned. Chapter 7, does not man have hard service on earth? Are not his days like those of a hired man, like a slave longing for the evening shadows, or a hired man waiting eagerly for his wages? So I have been allotted months of futility, and nights of misery have been assigned to me. When I lie down, I think, how long before I get up? The night drags on, and I toss till dawn. My body is clothed with worms and scabs. My skin is broken and festering. My days are swifter than a weaver's shuttle, and they come to an end without hope. Remember, O God, that my life is but a breath. My eyes will never see happiness again. The eye that now sees me will see me no longer. You will look for me, but I will be no more. As a cloud vanishes and is gone, so he who goes down to the grave does not return. He will never come to his house again. His place will know him no more. Therefore I will not keep silent. I will speak out in the anguish of my spirit. I will complain in the bitterness of my soul. Am I the sea or the monster of the deep that you put me under guard? When I think my bed will comfort me and my couch will ease my complaint, even then you frighten me with dreams and terrify me with visions. So I prefer strangling and death rather than this body of mine. I despise my life. I would not live forever. Let me alone. My days have no meaning. What is man that you make so much of him, that you give him so much attention? that you examine him every morning and test him every moment? Will you never look away from me or let me alone even for an instant? If I have sinned, what have I done to you, O watcher of men? Why have you made me your target? Have I become a burden to you? Why do you not pardon my offenses and forgive my sins? For I will soon lie down in the dust. You will search for me, but I will be no more. And so he says, look, I'm going to die, I'm going to be gone. Remember when we talked about this period of time, they were mainly thinking about their children as the progeny, the way they live on. Well, all his sons are dead. Right? He says, some point here I'm going to die and I'm going to be gone. And he's basically saying, God, can't you just ignore me for a while? Ignoring me would be better than the attention I'm getting right now. Right? Just forget about me and in a little while I'll die and be gone and you won't have to worry about me anymore. So chapter 8, another friend chimes in. Bildad the Shuhite. How long will you say such things? Your words are a blustering wind. Does God pervert justice? Does the Almighty pervert what is right? When your children sinned against him, he gave them over to the penalty of their sin. Boom. That's what happened. Your kids must have been evil and rotten and deserved it. That's why God had the building collapse on them. But if you will look to God and plead with the Almighty, if you are pure and upright, even now he will rouse himself on your behalf and restore you to your rightful place. Your beginnings will seem humble, so prosperous will your future be. He says, look, all you have to do is whatever you did, whatever horrible sins you committed, you need to go and humble yourself and ask God's forgiveness, and he'll forgive you and he'll bless you. Because that's how it works. Ask the former generations and find out what their fathers learned. For we were born only yesterday and know nothing, and our days on earth are but a shadow. Will they not instruct you and tell you? Will they not bring forth words from their understanding? Can papyrus grow tall where there is no marsh? Can reeds thrive without water? While still growing and uncut, they wither more quickly than grass. Such is the destiny of all who forget God. So perishes the hope of the godless. What he trusts in is fragile. What he relies on is a spider's web. He leans on his web, but it gives way. He clings to it, but it does not hold. He is like a well-watered plant in the sunshine, spreading its shoots over the garden. It entwines its roots around a pile of rocks and looks for a place among the stones. But when it is torn from its spot, that place disowns it and says, I never saw you. Surely its life withers away, and from the soil other plants grow. Right? So he says, look, somebody who's godless, who isn't trusting in God, like obviously you're not, Job. Look, you got nothing to rely on. It's like you're clinging to a spider's web that's falling apart. You know, it's fragile. You can't go through this life without trusting in God. Verse 20, surely God does not reject a blameless man or strengthen the hands of evildoers. He will yet fill your mouth with laughter and your lips with shouts of joy. Your enemies will be clothed in shame, and the tents of the wicked will be no more. Right? God doesn't reject good people. He doesn't punish bad people. So you need to become one of the good people, Job, and then everything will be fine. Chapter 9, then Job replied, indeed, I know that this is true, but how can a mortal be righteous before God? The one wished to dispute with him. He could not answer him one time out of 1,000. His wisdom is profound, his power is vast. Who has resisted him and come out unscathed? He moves mountains without their knowing it and overturns them in his anger. He shakes the earth from its place and makes its pillars tremble. He speaks to the sun and it does not shine. He seals off the light of the stars. He alone stretches out the heavens and treads on the waves of the sea. He is the maker of the Bear and Orion, the Pleiades and the constellations of the south. He performs wonders that cannot be fathomed, miracles that cannot be numbered. When he passes me, I cannot see him. When he goes by, I cannot perceive him. If he snatches away, who can stop him? Who can say to him, what are you doing? God does not restrain his anger. Even the cohorts of Rahab cowered at his feet. How then can I dispute with him? How can I find words to argue with him? Though I were innocent, I could not answer him. I could only plead with my judge for mercy. Even if I summoned him and he responded, I do not believe he would give me a hearing. He would crush me with a storm and multiply my wounds for no reason. He would not let me regain my breath, but would overwhelm me with misery. If it is a matter of strength, he is mighty, and if it is a matter of justice, who will summon him? So what he's saying is, okay, I agree with you on the theoretical level that God is just. God is just and God is fair. He says, but how exactly am I supposed to take him to court? Right? He and I seem to be having this disagreement. Right? Even if I somehow summoned him and got him to show up, right? What am I going to say to him? Right? I'm going to debate him and win. Right? He's like, that makes no sense. Verse 20. Even if I were innocent, my mouth would condemn me. If I were blameless, it would pronounce me guilty. Although I am blameless, I have no concern for myself. I despise my own life. It is all the same. That is why I say he destroys both the blameless and the wicked. When a scourge brings sudden death, he mocks the despair of the innocent. When a land falls into the hands of the wicked, he blindfolds its judges. If it is not he, then who is it? Right, so what's he saying? He's saying, look, bad things happen to good people and bad people. Someone invades a country, they don't just invade the bad people part, right? They invade the whole country, and everyone there suffers.
God sends acid rain on
Yeah. Verse 25, my days are swifter than a runner. They fly away without a glimpse of joy. They skim past like boats of papyrus, like eagles swooping down on their prey. If I say I will forget my complaint, I will change my expression and smile, I still dread all my sufferings, for I know you will not hold me innocent. Since I am already found guilty, why should I struggle in vain? Even if I washed myself with soap and my hands with washing soda, you would plunge me into a slime pit so that even my clothes would detest me. He is not a man like me that I might answer him, that we might confront each other in court. If only there were someone to arbitrate between us, to lay his hand upon us both, someone to remove God's rod from me, so that his terror would frighten me no more. Then I would speak up without fear of him, but as it stands now with me, I cannot. So, there's an interesting, you notice what he's asking at the end, it would be perfect if there was a mediator between me as a man and God. Right? Is that right? In Hebrews, St. Paul says, there's one mediator between God and man, Jesus Christ. That reconciliation happens in Christ. So we're going to talk more about that as we go forward, more specific about how that reconciliation happens. Chapter 10, I loathe my very life, therefore I will give free rein to my complaint and speak out in the bitterness of my soul. Right? He says, look, I'm ready to die, so I'm just going to say what I have to say, because what else is going to happen to me, I will say to God, do not condemn me, but tell me what charges you have against me. Does it please you to oppress me, to spurn the work of your hands while you smile on the schemes of the wicked? Do you have eyes of flesh? Do you see as a mortal sees? Are your days like those of a mortal, or your years like those of a man? That you must search out my faults and probe after my sin? Though you know that I am not guilty and that no one can rescue me from your hand? Your hands shaped me and made me. Will you now turn and destroy me? Remember that you molded me like clay. Will you now turn me to dust again? Did you not pour me out like milk and curdle me like cheese? Clothe me with skin and flesh and knit me together with bones and sinews? You gave me life and showed me kindness, and in your providence watched over my spirit. But this is what you concealed in your heart, and I know that this was in your mind. If I sinned, you would be watching me and would not let my offense go unpunished. If I am guilty, woe to me. Even if I am innocent, I cannot lift my head, for I am full of shame and drowned in my affliction. If I hold my head high, you stalk me like a lion, and again display your awesome power against me. You bring new witness against me, and increase your anger toward me. Your forces come against me wave upon wave. Why then did you bring me out of the womb? I wish I had died before an eye saw me. If only I had never come into being, or had been carried straight from the womb to the grave. Are not my few days almost over? Turn away from me so I can have a moment's joy. before I go to the place of no return, to the land of gloom and deep shadow, to the land of deepest night, of deep shadow and disorder, where even the light is like darkness. That description there at the end is where we talked about how Sheol or Hades, the grave, was viewed at this time. Right? He said, that's where I'm going to end up. Again, can you just not pay? Can you just ignore me until then? Can you let up? Now I want to pause for a moment here. Notice how Job is talking to God here. Did anybody notice that and get a little...
Yeah, he's...
Right?
It's not the move.
Right, but remember what we got from the frame. This isn't cursing God and dying. This is Job not sinning against God in any way. When we get into the Psalms, which is coming up next, we're going to see Psalms like Psalm 88 or 87, depending on Septuagint number 87, that we read at the beginning of Matins, okay, which has a very similar tone. Basically, how long are you going to keep beating up on me, Lord? Right? There are a lot of Psalms like that. There are a lot of Psalms that we're going to read like that. Okay? So remember, Israel, the name of God's people, means struggles with God. Doesn't mean submits to God. That's Islam. That's Islam. Submits to God. Israel means struggles with God. Struggles with God. Okay? We are sometimes too pious for our own good. Okay? Now, there's nothing wrong. Obviously, we want to be respectful. Right? We're always respectful toward people. Okay? But the fact that I love and respect my wife doesn't mean that we don't holler at each other once in a while. Right? When we're upset. When we have something we need to sort out. We have something we need to work out. And the fact that we holler at each other once in a while doesn't mean we don't respect each other and don't love each other. Okay? This is important. When we as a human person have a relationship with God, who is a person, right, with Jesus, okay? It's okay for us to express the feelings we have in that relationship. Okay? That's not blaspheming. Okay? Saying to God, my life is a mess and I don't know how it got to be a mess. Right? How long are you going to leave me here in this mess? Is not wrong or impious. If someone we love dies, looking at God and saying, God, why did you have to take them and why did you have to take them now, is not wrong. Asking him questions is not wrong. He's big enough to take it. He's not scared of us and our questions. Okay? He's not worried about it.
That's what Naaman says.
Yeah.
When he was talking about prayer, I think it was Naaman, he says, don't be afraid to get mad at God. He can take it.
Yeah. Because, we tend to think, it's very possible for we as human beings to shake our fists at God. Okay? But it's very prideful of us to think that really matters to him. To think that somehow he's put out and offended. Okay? So this we need to, as we go through this, as we go through Psalms, right, understand that our prayer life isn't just God wants to hear us recite the same things over and over again. He just really likes the way tone 3 sounds. And so, he really wants to hear us do a couple of Troparia in tone 3. That's what he really wants. Right? That's not to say that we shouldn't be doing Troparia in tone 3 in worship. Right? It has its place and it has its purpose. Okay? But our relationship with God, again, is a relationship between two persons. Okay? That includes... And God is plenty open with us, as we've already seen in the Old Testament, in sharing his feelings about some of the things we do. He tells us it's okay for us to share back when we're confused and we're upset and we're angry and we don't understand. It's a two-way street. Okay, so I want to stop and say it because Job's going to keep it up. Job's going to keep it up. Okay, chapter 11. Another country heard from. Here's our third friend. Zophar the Naamathite, no relation to Jonah. He replied, "Are all these words to go unanswered? Is this talker to be vindicated? Will your idle talk reduce men to silence? Will no one rebuke you when you mock? You say to God, 'My beliefs are flawless and I am pure in your sight.' Oh, how I wish that God would speak, that he would open his lips against you and disclose to you the secrets of wisdom. For true wisdom has two sides. Know this, God has even forgotten some of your sin." Right? You've sinned so much, God's probably forgotten half of it. Okay? So far are you from not having done anything wrong, Job. Can you fathom the mysteries of God? Can you probe the limits of the Almighty? They are higher than the heavens. What can you do? They are deeper than the depths of the grave. What can you know? Their measure is longer than the earth and wider than the sea. If he comes along and confines you in prison and convenes a court, who can oppose him? Surely he recognizes deceitful men. And when he sees evil, does he not take note? But a witless man can no more become wise than a wild donkey's colt can be born a man. Yet if you devote your heart to him, Yet if you devote your heart to him and stretch out your hands to him, if you put away the sin that is in your hand and allow no evil to dwell in your tent, then you will lift up your face without shame. You will stand firm and without fear. You will surely forget your trouble, recalling it only as waters gone by. Life will be brighter than noonday, and darkness will become like morning. You will be secure because there is hope. You will look about you and take your rest in safety. You will lie down with no one to make you afraid, and many will court your favor. But the eyes of the wicked will fail, and escape will elude them. Their hope will become a dying gasp. So what do we have again? Right? No, Job, you're not getting it. You're not getting it. Again, bad things happen to bad people. Good things happen to good people. Bad things are happening to you, so obviously you're a bad person. Right? I hate to be the one to tell you. Right? But obviously you're a bad person and you had this coming. Okay? Now the irony is, how does he start it off? Can you understand the mysteries of God? Right? All three friends kind of think they do, right? They think they pretty much got how the world works out. If you're a good person and you do things right, you'll be rich and wealthy and have tons of kids, and everything will be happy and wonderful with you. If you do bad things, horrible things will happen to you. That's how the world works. We now have fathomed the mysteries of God. Right? And Job's saying, it's not quite that way, and I'm exhibit A. Sitting here on my dung heap.
Do you think that Satan sent him to sort of jab him? I mean, they don't sound like real friends.
No, they're not very good friends.
No.
They're not very, as Job keeps pointing out to them, they're not really good friends. Whether Satan sent them, it doesn't say. It doesn't say.
But they're not encouraging you.
But they're educated by the fallen world.
Yeah.
So they can make stupid statements.
That's but this line of thinking not only continues to today,
Well, that's true.
you know, but I mean, you see it all through the Bible. I mean, remember when they come upon the man born blind? Jesus said to the disciples, "Who sinned, this man or his father, that he was born blind?" Well, what's that? Somebody must have done something wrong, or he wouldn't be blind. Right. So that line of thinking is very, and it's what's behind the question that people ask today. Why do bad things happen to good people? Right? Why is that a question? Well, because in people's mind, good things should happen to good people and bad things should happen to bad people. I mean, that's the common sense. So chapter 12. Then Job replied, "Doubtless you are the people, and wisdom will die with you." Right? Clearly, you have it all figured out, you three.
And when you're gone, so will wisdom.
Yeah. So when you die, I don't know who will instruct the young, because
The rest of us.
verse 3, because I have a mind as well as you, I am not inferior to you. Who does not know all these things? I have become a laughingstock to my friends, though I called upon God and he answered, a mere laughingstock, though righteous and blameless. Men at ease have contempt for misfortune, as the fate of those whose feet are slipping. The tents of marauders are undisturbed, and those who provoke God are secure, those who carry their God in their hands. So he's saying, look, I can give you plenty of examples. Like the guys who just robbed me and stole all my stuff, they seem to be doing fine. Right. Idol worshipers out there who seem to be doing fine. Right? Meanwhile, I'm here in the dung heap. But ask the animals and they will teach you, or the birds of the air and they will tell you, or speak to the earth and it will teach you, or let the fish of the sea inform you. Which of all these does not know that the hand of the Lord has done this? In his hand is the life of every creature and the breath of all mankind. Does not the ear test words as the tongue tastes food? Is not wisdom found among the aged? Does not long life bring understanding? To God belong wisdom and power, counsel and understanding are his. What he tears down cannot be rebuilt. The man he imprisons cannot be released. If he holds back the waters, there is drought. If he lets them loose, they devastate the land. To him belong strength and victory, both deceived and deceiver are his. He leads counselors away stripped and makes fools of judges. He takes off the shackles put on by kings and ties a loincloth around their waist. He leads priests away stripped and overthrows men long established. He silences the lips of trusted advisors and takes away the discernment of elders. He pours contempt on nobles and disarms the mighty. He reveals the deep things of darkness and brings deep shadows into the light. He makes nations great and destroys them. He enlarges nations and disperses them. He deprives the leaders of the earth of their reason. He sends them wandering through a trackless waste. They grope in darkness with no light. He makes them stagger like drunkards. Right, so he's saying, look, just look at the world around you. Okay? Yeah, God raises up nations. He also brings down nations. Right? He's doing all of this. He's doing all of this. My eyes have seen all this. My ears have heard and understood it. What you know, I also know. I am not inferior to you. But I desire to speak to the Almighty and to argue my case with God. You, however, smear me with lies. You are worthless physicians, all of you. If only you would be altogether silent. For you, that would be wisdom. Hear now my argument. Listen to the plea of my lips. Will you speak wickedly on God's behalf? Will you speak deceitfully for him? Will you show him partiality? Will you argue the case for God? Would it turn out well if he examined you? Could you deceive him as you might deceive men?
Waiting for him to say that.
He would surely rebuke you if you secretly showed partiality. Would not his splendor terrify you? Would not the dread of him fall on you? Your maxims are proverbs of ashes. Your defenses are defenses of clay. Keep silent and let me speak. Then let come to me what may. Why do I put myself in jeopardy and take my life in my hands? Though he slay me, yet will I hope in him. I will surely defend my ways to his face. Okay? See, what he keeps repeating is, he's saying, I'm not saying anything about God and his justice. I know all this stuff you're saying is true. He says, but I also know that I'm innocent. Right? And I'm suffering. And despite the fact that he's done everything except kill me, even if he now goes ahead and kills me, I'm still going to put my hope in him. I'm still not going to curse him. I'm still not going to reject him.
He's going to proclaim his innocence.
Yeah. Verse 16, indeed this might turn out for my deliverance, for no godless man would dare come before him. Listen carefully to my words, let your ears take in what I say. Now that I have prepared my case, I know I will be vindicated. Can anyone bring charges against me? If so, I will be silent and die. Only grant me these two things, O God, and then I will not hide from you. Withdraw your hand far from me and stop frightening me with your terrors. Then summon me and I will answer, or let me speak and you reply. So he's saying, this is what I want. Right? Enough of you three. Right? enough of you three. Just, God, let me have some rest, and then let's talk. Right? That's really what he's saying. Give me some rest, and then let's talk. Let me explain how I feel, where I'm coming from, and you explain to me why this is happening. How many wrongs and sins have I committed? Show me my offense and my sin. Why do you hide your face and consider me your enemy? Will you torment a wind-blown leaf? Will you chase after dry chaff? For you write down bitter things against me and make me inherit the sins of my youth. You fasten my feet in shackles. You keep close watch on all my paths. By putting marks on the soles of my feet, so man wastes away like something rotten, like a garment eaten by moths. Man born of woman is a few days and full of trouble. He springs up like a flower and withers away like a fleeting shadow he does not endure. Do you fix your eye on such a one? Will you bring him before you for judgment? Who can bring what is pure from the impure? No one. Man's days are determined. You have decreed the number of his months, and have set limits he cannot exceed. So look away from him and let him alone, till he has put in his time like a hired man. So again, he's saying, look, you've set the limit of how long my life is going to be, and it's not going to be that long. Right? And he says, at least again, ignore me. Let me finish out this time in peace. At least there is hope for a tree. If it is cut down, it will sprout again, and its new shoots will not fail. Its roots may grow old in the ground, and its stump die in the soil. Yet at the scent of water it will bud and put forth shoots like a plant. But man dies and is laid low. He breathes his last and is no more. As water disappears from the sea, or a riverbed becomes parched and dry, so man lies down and does not rise. Till the heavens are no more, men will not awake or be roused from their sleep. Okay, so what's he saying? He's saying, if you cut down a tree, something might grow out of it. Even if you cut it all the way down to the stump, something might come forth. But when I die, it's going to be over. If only you would hide me in the grave and conceal me till your anger is past. If only you would set me a time and then remember me. If a man dies, will he live again? All the days of my hard service I will wait for my renewal to come. You will call and I will answer you. You will long for the creature your hands have made. Surely then you will count my steps, but not keep track of my sin. My offenses will be sealed up in a bag. You will cover over my sin. But as a mountain erodes and crumbles, and as a rock is moved from its place, as water wears away stones and torrents wash away the soil, so you destroy man's hope. You overpower him once for all, and he is gone. You change his countenance and send him away. If his sons are honored, he does not know it. If they are brought low, he does not see it. He feels but the pain of his own body and mourns only for himself. It's kind of a depressing place to leave off, but I think that's where we're going to leave. We're going to end up leaving off tonight. Now you notice there's one of the movements we're going to see over the course of Job is the way he talks about death. Is the way he talks about death. And this isn't totally going to make sense now, but remember it. I'll mention it again, and it'll make sense when we get to the end. Right now, how is he talking about death? First time he talked about death, it was like Sheol or Hades, the grave, the traditional, just darkness. Right? Just darkness. That is sort of this equalizer. Right? Now when he talks about it, note, he talks about men dying and not rising, but then in verse 13, if only you would hide me in the grave and conceal me till your anger has passed. If only you would set me a time and then remember me. Right? And then he continues, if a man dies, will he live again? All the days of my hard service I will wait for my renewal to come. So now there's another idea starting to gel here. this idea that maybe the grave is still, he's still looking at the grave as an answer, right? He's to go to his sufferings. He can't handle the sufferings. He wants that to end. But he now has this idea that maybe sometime after, God will remember him or think about him again. So we'll see how that little thread develops as we go through the rest of the book. Because what we're going to do, there's going to be, we've sort of gone through one cycle of the book of each of the friends piping up and responding to them. When we come back next time and get in, starting in chapter 15, there's now going to be another cycle of the friends piping up with their important wisdom to explain things to Job. Set him on the right track. Next week we're going to have Forgiveness Vespers, but the plan is we're going to go ahead and have Bible study afterward. The current plan...
Vespers here.
Right.
Then we'll have Bible study after.
The current plan is whenever we have Vespers here, Forgiveness Vespers or regular Vespers on Sunday night, but it's here, we'll have class afterwards.
Except when we host.
Yeah. When we have the Pan-Orthodox Vespers, whether that's here or someone else, where we have all the churches and the food and everything, then, I'm not going to make everybody come out to Bluefield to have class. But yeah, so it'll be, yeah, we're going to be out there 1 week. But so,
What's that?
Vespers is at 6, right?
Vespers is at 6 o'clock.
Is at 6 o'clock, so it'll probably be
Not quarter.
quarter to 7. If for some reason you can't make Vespers. Yeah, so it'll probably end up, the way we leave some time and people mill around there, it'll probably be 7 o'clock.
Right.
That we'll end up starting. Okay, so thanks everybody.